Imagine you're a researcher tracking birth certificates and intelligence data across generations. You begin to notice an unexpected pattern. The individuals with higher test scores, more years of education, and greater academic achievements consistently have fewer children. This isn't happening in just one country or culture. It's a trend emerging across the developed world. Think about South Korea for a moment, one of the world's most educated nations. Their fertility rate, just 0.78 children per woman. That's the lowest ever recorded by any country in human history. Meanwhile, in regions where educational opportunities are scarce, families are still large and thriving. Have you ever wondered why this might be happening? What is it about intelligence and education that seems to push people away from having children? Multiple studies, including groundbreaking research in the journal Intelligence, have documented these correlations between higher cognitive ability and lower fertility rates. One massive study, tracking thousands of people, found something remarkable. For every standard deviation increase in childhood intelligence, the likelihood of becoming a parent actually decreased. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the crucial point we're going to explore together. Correlation doesn't equal causation. This pattern isn't some biological law written in stone. It's emerging from a complex web of social, economic, and psychological factors that we can actually understand and potentially change. Charles Darwin himself grappled with this possibility over 150 years ago. He worried that advanced societies might create conditions where reproductive success becomes disconnected from the traits that benefit civilization. He recognized this as a profound evolutionary challenge that deserved serious consideration. Not because intelligence determines worth, but because it raises fascinating questions about how human societies evolve. The relationship between intelligence and fertility is some simple biological equation. The primary drivers of declining fertility in developed nations are actually socio-economic. Skyrocketing costs of raising children, intense career demands, urbanization, widespread access to contraception, and completely transformed social expectations about what life should look like. Intelligence correlates with these factors because higher cognitive ability typically leads to extended education, delayed entry into the workforce, and career paths that directly compete with family formation during those crucial reproductive years. Have you ever found yourself overthinking a major life decision? Well, here's where cognitive psychology offers some fascinating insights. Daniel Kahneman's research on how we think shows that people who engage more in analytical reasoning, often those with higher intelligence, tend to apply rigorous cost-benefit analysis to major life decisions, including having children. When you sit down and calculate that raising a child costs over $230,000 in the US, factor in the opportunity costs for career advancement, and consider the complexity of modern parenting expectations, what conclusion might your analytical mind reach? That having children is economically suboptimal. But the psychology goes deeper than just money. Several other factors are at play, and you might recognize some of these patterns in yourself or people you know. Higher cognitive ability often correlates with increased awareness of risks. More educated individuals tend to have higher anxiety about parenting competence. They're more aware of child development research, more concerned about potential negative outcomes, and more likely to delay having children until they feel completely prepared, a standard that may never feel truly achievable. Does this sound familiar? The desire to be the perfect parent before even starting. There's also what I call expanded opportunity awareness. When you're intelligent, you can often envision multiple fulfilling life paths and career possibilities. Having children becomes just one option among many rather than the default expectation it once was. When you can see dozens of ways to build a meaningful life, choosing parenthood requires a more deliberate decision. But here's the key insight. These psychological patterns aren't fixed laws of nature. Cultural messaging about parenthood, social support systems, and policy environments all influence how intelligent individuals weigh these decisions. The correlation exists within our current social context, but context can change. Darwin's concern wasn't actually about intelligence itself, but about a broader evolutionary principle. What happens when civilization creates conditions where beneficial traits become disconnected from reproductive success? Think about it this way. Natural selection operates purely on differential reproduction, regardless of what traits society happens to value. In pre-industrial societies, intelligence was more directly linked to survival and reproduction. Smarter individuals could find food more efficiently, navigate complex social relationships, and provide more effectively for their offspring. But modern civilization has largely severed this connection. Today, intelligence might help you succeed professionally, but it could simultaneously lead to life choices that reduce your reproductive output. That's the paradox. History offers some intriguing examples, though we need to be careful not to oversimplify. During the later Roman Empire, wealthy and educated families did tend to have fewer children. But would you blame Rome's decline solely on fertility patterns? Of course not. There were conquests, economic instability, political corruption, and countless other factors. What's more relevant is how some societies have successfully navigated similar challenges. France in the 18th century experienced declining birth rates among educated classes, but responded with cultural and policy changes that supported family formation. Some Scandinavian countries today maintain relatively higher fertility rates among educated populations through comprehensive family support policies. But here's what makes humans unique in evolutionary terms. We can understand these processes and potentially influence them through conscious choice and cultural innovation. We're not just passive subjects of evolutionary forces. We can identify patterns and decide how to respond. The question is, what do we want that response to look like? While Darwin foresaw the problem, let's now look at evidence showing the relationship is more complex than even he might have imagined. Just when you think you understand the pattern, recent research throws some fascinating curveballs. A Swedish study of military conscripts found a positive correlation between intelligence and fertility among men, particularly for having a first child. But here's what makes this finding so disruptive to the dominant narrative. When Swedish researchers tracked these men over decades, they discovered that higher IQ conscripts were actually 25% more likely to become fathers by age 40. This completely contradicts the supposed universal intelligence fertility trade-off and suggests that social context, not cognitive ability itself, drives reproductive choices. The Swedish pattern likely emerges because their society has fundamentally restructured the economics of parenthood. Fathers receive 240 days of paid parental leave compared to 0 federally mandated days in the US. Universal childcare costs just $150 per month regardless of family income, and flexible work arrangements are legally protected rather than career suicide. Cross-national studies reveal that the correlation changes dramatically between countries. In societies with strong family support systems, the correlation sometimes disappears entirely or even reverses. This global variation reinforces that we're dealing with social phenomena, not biological laws. Have you ever considered how much your environment shaped your own intellectual development? Environmental factors play enormous roles in cognitive development. Nutrition, education quality, social stimulation, and healthcare access all influence intellectual growth. Even if there was slight genetic selection against intelligence, which remains hotly debated, improvements in these environmental factors could easily counteract any genetic trends. Moreover, intelligence isn't a single thing. Modern cognitive science recognizes multiple intelligences: analytical, creative, practical, emotional, and social. Most research focuses on analytical intelligence measured by IQ tests, but evolutionary success might depend more on emotional intelligence, social cooperation, or adaptability. And here's something that might blow your mind. We're living through unprecedented technological change that could fundamentally alter what kinds of intelligence matter for human flourishing. If artificial intelligence handles many analytical tasks, human value might shift toward creativity, emotional insight, or other capabilities that traditional intelligence measures don't even capture. Before we go further, we need to address something directly. Any discussion of intelligence and reproduction risks being misinterpreted or misused for eugenic purposes. The history of such misuse is both tragic and instructive, and we need to be crystal clear about why this research doesn't support those conclusions. Eugenic programs have always been based on pseudoscience, racial prejudice, and coercive policies that violate basic human rights. The research on fertility and intelligence doesn't support eugenic conclusions because intelligence is highly influenced by environment, varies greatly within all populations, represents only one of many valuable human traits, and correlates with fertility through social mechanisms rather than biological inevitability. What's the appropriate response to demographic trends? It's definitely not telling anyone whether they should or shouldn't have children. Instead, we need to create social conditions that support whatever reproductive choices people freely make. If intelligent individuals are having fewer children because of economic pressures, career conflicts, or inadequate support systems, what should we do? Address those structural problems, not pressure individuals about their personal choices. Any policy response must focus on expanding choices and removing barriers, never on directing or coercing reproductive decisions. The goal should be creating conditions where people can pursue both intellectual fulfillment and family life, if they choose to do so. Here's where things get even more interesting. The link between intelligence and fertility mainly appears in developed countries with specific economic and social systems. In many developing regions, completely different patterns still exist. Where survival is more challenging, the traditional connection between intelligence and reproductive success may continue to operate. As nations grow wealthier and more stable, they typically go through what demographers call the demographic transition. Fertility rates drop across the board, often starting with the more educated segments of society. This suggests it's not intelligence itself driving the trend, but rather how people respond to the pressures and opportunities that come with development. The integration of artificial intelligence into our work and family lives offers concrete solutions to many of the socio-economic pressures driving the intelligence-fertility correlation. Rather than some distant transformation, AI tools are already enabling the flexible work arrangements that make parenthood more feasible for knowledge workers. Remote collaboration platforms powered by AI allow parents to maintain career momentum while being present for family life. Smart home systems can handle routine childcare logistics, monitoring sleep patterns, managing schedules, even providing educational activities, reducing the intensive daily management that makes modern parenting so exhausting. Consider how AI tutoring systems could democratize high-quality education, removing the pressure on educated parents to provide constant intellectual stimulation. or how AI-assisted medical monitoring could ease the health anxieties that disproportionately affect well-informed parents. These aren't hypothetical futures, they're emerging realities that could fundamentally ease the work-family conflicts that drive reproductive delay among intelligent individuals. The key insight is that technological change moves at lightning speed, while human genetics evolve slowly. These practical AI applications could make today's demographic concerns completely irrelevant within just a few decades. What do you think? Are we worrying about problems that technology will solve before they become serious issues? Now, let's examine the practical solutions that are already working in the real world. The most promising responses to current demographic trends aren't theoretical. They're practical innovations that address the root causes of the intelligence-fertility correlation, and we can see them working in the real world. Countries like France and Sweden have implemented comprehensive family support systems, including generous parental leave, subsidized childcare, flexible work arrangements, and direct financial support for families. These policies appear to reduce the career-family conflict that drives much of the correlation we've been discussing, and we can measure the results. These countries maintain higher fertility rates among educated populations compared to nations with less supportive policies. It's not just theory, it works. Academic and professional institutions need to fundamentally restructure how they operate. Instead of demanding total life dedication during prime reproductive years, we should design career paths with flexibility for family formation. Universities could offer career stage parental support. Companies could normalize parent-friendly policies, and research institutions could provide comprehensive childcare and family accommodations. But cultural messaging matters enormously too. If society celebrates parenthood as compatible with intellectual achievement, if we highlight successful parent scholars and parent professionals, if we frame child-rearing as intellectually stimulating rather than career-limiting, reproductive choices might shift accordingly. Think about the messages you received growing up about career success and family life. Were they presented as competing priorities or complementary paths? Policymakers should also reconsider how we structure education and career development. If higher education didn't require such intensive time investment during prime reproductive years, if career advancement offered more diverse pathways, if financial success wasn't so dependent on undivided career focus, the apparent conflict between intelligence and fertility might largely disappear. These aren't pie-in-the-sky solutions. They're practical interventions that societies can implement to create conditions where intelligence and family formation aren't unnecessarily opposed. Perhaps most importantly, should we even assume that maximizing any single trait, including intelligence, should be evolution's or society's primary goal? Human flourishing depends on an incredible diversity of qualities: wisdom, compassion, creativity, resilience, cooperation, and countless other attributes that don't show up on any IQ test. Evolution has no predetermined direction or ultimate goal. It simply reflects what traits get passed on under current conditions. If social conditions change, evolutionary pressures change accordingly. Rather than assuming current trends will continue indefinitely, we can work to create conditions that support the traits and outcomes we actually value. The real question isn't whether intelligent people should have more children. It's whether we want to live in societies where career success and family formation are unnecessarily opposed, where economic pressures discourage thoughtful individuals from having children they might genuinely want, and where social structures make parenting more difficult than it needs to be. Darwin's insight about the potential disconnect between beneficial traits and reproductive success remains relevant, but it's not a predetermined catastrophe. It's an evolutionary challenge that human societies can address through conscious adaptation. The correlation between intelligence and lower fertility emerges from specific social and economic conditions, not biological inevitability. By understanding these conditions, we can work to change them. The goal shouldn't be pressuring anyone toward particular reproductive choices, but creating societies where people can pursue both intellectual fulfillment and family life without unnecessary conflict. This requires nuanced thinking that goes beyond simple correlations and easy answers. We need policies that genuinely support working parents, cultural changes that celebrate diverse forms of achievement, economic structures that don't penalize family formation, and social systems that recognize parenting as valuable work deserving of real support. The future of human capability, whether genetic, cultural, or technological, isn't predetermined by current trends. We have the uniquely human ability to understand evolutionary processes and respond thoughtfully to them. So, rather than fearing demographic change, we can see it as an opportunity to build better societies. Rather than accepting apparent conflicts between intelligence and reproduction, we can work to resolve those conflicts through innovation and adaptation. This conversation is far from over. In fact, the most important voices haven't been heard yet. Yours. What part of this evolutionary paradox do you find the most thought-provoking, or maybe even unsettling? Are these demographic trends a ticking time bomb for human progress, or just another temporary detour nature and society will eventually correct? Have you seen this play out in your own circles? That friend with 3 kids who somehow still manages deep philosophical debates? Or maybe the brilliant colleague who can't imagine fitting kids into a life full of intellectual pursuits? What would it take to make both more compatible, and why does it feel so hard? Here's a question that might turn this entire topic on its head. If you could rebuild society from the ground up to nurture both genius and generations, what's the very first thing you'd change? And why on earth haven't we done it yet? I'd genuinely love to hear your take. These are messy, complicated issues, and they only get clear when a lot of different minds weigh in. So drop your thoughts in the comments. This is where the conversation really begins. And hey, thanks for watching. This was Philosophy Coded. If this gave you something to chew on, maybe pass it along, whether it's to that one overeducated friend still wrestling with life choices, or someone who's already balancing toddlers and Tolstoy. Either way, it just might spark a conversation worth having.